Why do you believe what you believe? Because at some point in your life, you trusted the information that somebody was giving you. And that someone you trusted told you that a car was a car, a tree was a tree, a bird was a bird, the blue stuff above you is the sky. And that's the way that we began to determine what we believe to be a fact. Most of the things that we believe to be a fact in our lives are told to us through our stories or the news that we hear. So my question would be, if they were deceiving you with the stories they tell you, would you be able to recognize that?
So we've all heard the term conspiracy theory. Personally, for me, I've never really had time to get into any of that because, frankly, I'm working all the time and I don't have the time to look into Bigfoot or aliens or flat Earth or 9/11 conspiracy or the JFK assassination. It's just, it's not anything that I really have any backstory on. But the one thing that I do have a lot of backstory on, the one thing I do know a lot about is Hollywood.
When you think about the entertainment industry, what comes to mind? Movies, TV, music, right? Let's talk about this entertainment.
I've been observing you.
What if this entertainment was more than just entertainment?
Now in complete control!
When you're driving home from work, what are you listening to? When you come home after a long day and turn on the TV, what do you see?
The U.S. are bracing.
Saying that the one.
Think about all the content you've seen throughout your whole life. A lot of it has actually made us who we are today.
So you don't know what's really going on.
Have you ever stopped for just a second, though, and questioned the content?
Good morning, Vietnam!
The only thing we consume more than content is air. But we actually think about the quality of the air we breathe. Maybe it's time to take a closer look at our content.
And fear. Taxes.
Our government's always controlled our content.
The fight for freedom.
We've just never paid attention.
Freedom of speech.
Message received.
The police occupy our community.
To work with the CIA to destabilize foreign countries.
This media that we're consuming at such a rapid rate, we need to slow down and think about what we're consuming.
Bullshit going on.
What if the people in charge didn't have our best interests in mind? Now we have to ask ourselves, who's influencing our content?
Is the CIA involved in Hollywood?
Yes.
Guys, come ahead.
I'm rolling. Go. That's good right there. It's picking up speed. Go, go, go. Go, go, go. Go, go, go.
So for the past 28 years, I've probably had one of the coolest jobs in the world. I was a professional stunt performer. I've worked with some of the biggest stars. I've got to be Batman. I've got to be James Bond. I've won World Stunt Awards. I am in the Screen Actors Guild. I'm in the DGA. I'm in the WGA. And last year, I got into the Academy, the Oscars. I worked my way up from being a stuntman to being a fight coordinator, to being a stunt coordinator, to being a second unit director. Action! First big job I get, I'm on Batman Forever. And I'm walking around set and I'm pinching myself. I'm looking over, there's Tommy Lee Jones, there's Jim Carrey, there's Val Kilmer, there's Drew Barrymore, there's Nicole Kidman. And I'm like, how did I get here? I didn't really say I'm gonna go be a stuntman. I wanted to go make movies. But being a stuntman was the easiest way for me to get into the business. I didn't want to be an actor because like pretending to be a character. Well, being a stuntman, I was that character. I was the guy behind the illusion, creating it for the guy who's on the screen. I jumped out of that helicopter. I was in that fireball. I did whatever was being asked of the job. I've had an amazing career, and I've had an amazing life.
2, 1, action! All right, that's a cut.
But in the system that exists today, as I get up the ladder, I realize it's not what people think it is. It's an illusion. It is a complete illusion.
We're gonna put our pick and our turning shift and our
In 2014, I was working on a television show up in Portland, and I had a catastrophic injury. I've done this stunt, probably variations of it 20 times over my career. It was nothing. It was a small fall down into a stairwell. I did the first take fine, the second take, I knew I could do it better. I went up and I fell over the rail and I landed on the pipe down below and I burst fractured my L2 vertebrae and I was paralyzed from the waist down. When you are injured, when you are catastrophically injured and it changes who you are, I knew from that day I would never be the athlete that I once was. And I always told people as a stuntman, the worst possible injury you can get is a lower back injury. You can break your legs, your arms, whatever, but if you injure your lower back or your hips, your pelvic region, you're done. There was 2 years that I didn't think I would ever live without pain. One of the issues I was dealing with at that time was I had lost the feeling, and I still have numbness in my thighs and on this half of my pelvic region. I was going to physical therapy and the lady looks at me and she goes, "This isn't really helping you. You're way more advanced than this stuff." And I go, "Yeah, I do this every morning." She goes, "Well, what's the real issue?" I said, "The real issue is my pelvic region." And so she said, "Okay, well, there's a woman who works here and she is a pelvic floor therapist."
So how I met Mike, I met him, his spine was broken and he had partial paralyzation of his pelvic floor area. We help people when they have problems with the most important functions in your life, bowel, bladder, and sexual function.
So one day we're in the middle of therapy and she stops me and she says, "Mike, I feel like you have really dark spirits over you. Can I pray for you?" And I was like, "Pray for me?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, pray for me. I don't really believe in that stuff anymore, but yeah, go ahead, pray for me." So she prays for me. And I was kind of thinking while she's doing it, okay, this is weird, but okay, whatever. So for the next 2 or 3 months, I would go, and then every now and then she would stop me and she'd say, "Hey, can I pray over you?"
I was kind of a little bit disgusted with his personality because he was all about himself and money, and I think the Lord had a lot of work to do in terms of humility with him. He made it very clear that he thought I was crazy, but he let me.
After she stopped one day, and I said, "You are either 100% batshit crazy, or you think all this is real in the spirit world." And she looked at me and she said, "Michael, I am one of the only pelvic floor therapists in Southern California at the time. And when these satanic people and these evil people do their rituals to little girls and women and boys, who do you think puts them back together? I do. It's completely real, and you need to look into it."
My awakening, it didn't happen at church the way that some people find God. I just pretty much had given up my faith and I'd given up where I was at, and I was just kind of at the point where I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have the best time I can here, and when I die, that's it.
I still wasn't sure if it wasn't 100% crazy or not, but I was reading these articles and looking at these things, and I was like,
I've seen things at parties. I've seen artwork. I've seen statues. I've seen things in some people's houses that just seem to be mimicking occult stuff I'm reading about. So I was like, maybe there is something to this. I'm just gonna say this. I didn't find God because I went to church. I found God because I realized that the Luciferian and the other side, the occult world, was real, and that I had been fooled for all these years, and I then got really scared. I got really scared because this was the first time in my life that I was having to question my own reality. Physically, I was crushed. I wasn't going to be who I was. And spiritually, I mean, if I'm being honest, I didn't know anything about being a Christian. I mean, really. And then professionally, everything that I knew about my career, I was starting to look at in a different way. I was starting to question my career in Hollywood from a different perspective. So at first, I got off of social media and I made an anonymous account. I started reading blogs, looking at articles, I started reading books, I started watching videos online. I just started searching for the truth, and I was finding accounts that were searching for the truth themselves. They weren't mainstream accounts. These were accounts online that I felt like were like me. They were just looking for what the truth was. I didn't believe I was getting the truth from CNN, MSNBC, Fox. I didn't believe any of them. I just wanted to read it, absorb it, and digest it, and trust what my gut told me I was reading. As I did my research, I began to understand there's a very small group of people that influence all the companies that we watch. So they used to call them the Big Six. But Disney just bought Fox, and Disney controls Marvel, and Disney owns Lucas Studios. So look at that giant audience right here. Say a small group of people control the narratives and the content that we all see on all the channels. It makes you feel like, oh, I have lots of choices, but you don't. Who's telling them what to put on those channels? Where does that lead?
Tonight, the FBI is on the case, and they are warning big companies in America to protect their data after a big Hollywood studio got hit by hackers and several blockbuster movies ended up online.
This is the first time the United States has accused a foreign government of a cyber attack against an American corporation.
And this interested me because I worked over at Sony quite a bit during my career, and I actually had to get LifeLock during the Sony hack, so I was curious. I was like, what was this really about? Well, the narrative put out in the public was Seth Rogen and James Franco made a movie about North Korea. And so they were mad, and so they decided to hack Sony to teach them a lesson. That was a public narrative that went out, and that's what I was like, well, that makes sense. You know, I know Seth and I know James, and they're definitely pushed the envelope of comedy, and their sense of humor is definitely their own. And I thought to myself, okay, that makes sense.
And now private emails are going public.
It's a public relations disaster.
But what I found really interesting as I examined the WikiLeaks documents was it showed that the heads of one of our biggest movie studios in America was in direct communication with very important people in our government. It didn't surprise me. I was like, okay, well, either they're friends or there's something more to it. So I never really thought about the government influencing our content or our stories. Could they be influencing our story and our content? Like, these were real questions that I never had asked myself. I just did the jobs. I went to work, I did my job, I did whatever was asked, and went home. Never thought about this stuff. So I was like, I don't really know anybody that can answer these questions. And I reached out to this guy who I'd been watching online. His name was Kevin Shipp. And for those of you who don't know who Kevin Shipp is, he's a CIA whistleblower. He worked in counterintelligence, and he served in many capacities in his tenure at the CIA.
This is the big picture. An official television report to the nation from the United States Army.
It was an OSS memo, the precursor to the CIA, where they were doing a study